This is my presentation and YouTube video report on Emily Dickinson, the poet of the mid to late 1800s. Emily Dickinson was born to parents Edward Dickinson and Emily Norcross, who met at a chemistry lecture that they were both attending at a chance encounter. He courted her for about 2.25 years by letter until he proposed. They often decided uh, to get married while the woman was reluctant, as in this case. But unlike other people, she was reluctant because of his eccentricness. They married on May 6th, 1828, and for one term, Edward was elected a congressman at some point during their marriage. I have yet to receive the date on that. He was very strict towards his children's reading books and habits, and some people accord that to being why Emily Dickinson's love of poetry and the untypical or not typical method of writing was developed. Her brother William Dickinson, who was also known by his middle name Austin, was born on April 16th, 1829. Emily herself was born on December 10th of 1830, just a year later, or maybe a year and a half by the calculations I'm doing. Lavinia Norcross Dickinson, her younger sister, was born on February 28th, 1833, so quite a bit bigger gap between Emily and Lavinia versus William and Emily. Emily was often viewed as sickly and kept home from school in her parents' household and under some governesses watching over her. Emily attended a co-educational school named Amherst Academy, and her teachers recognized her as a prodigy, and her peers did as well. But she also excelled in composition, not surprising since she's one of the most famous poets that America has, but also in Latin and the sciences such as botany, which was one of her favorites. Her religious upbringing, both at school and the church, was based on an evangelical Calvinism approach to God and spirituality and Christianity. And she was influenced by the American transcendentalist author Ralph Waldo Emerson. Her unusual poetry patterns have struck many as odd. The capital letters in the middle of words and sentences, the creative pauses in unfinished lines, and random skips throughout the whole poem itself, as well as double spaces, have been noted. She had slant rhyme words, words that looked like they should rhyme but really didn't, like storm and worm, I think, were two examples given in my research. Her dashes were also very interesting, as you can see in the picture I've provided. They were somewhat irregular, and most people find that very interesting, especially on some other poems that she has where there is a dash in the middle of or at the very end of the poem itself. Her poetry was written throughout her whole life, and she sent many to friends by course of letter. She wrote almost 1,800 poems, but 1,100 of those were written before she was 35 years old. While she was alive, she only published 11 poems, less than a dozen, in newspapers, and most were under a name anonymous. But, I will leave the story of her poems for a later slide. But these are some of the names of her poems that she had published, such as "I'd Taste a Liquor Never Brewed," or blazing in gold and quenching in purple, or flowers, well, if anybody. Some keep the Sabbath going to church, and success is counted sweetest. Just some unique names of her much loved poetry. She was often considered the woman in white because of her seclusion after taking care of her mother. Her mother was very sick for a long period of time, which is why, or could be why, Emily never married. That she felt it was her duty to take care of her mother, although her brother's uh, niece, her brother's children became very much so like her own, with her brother and sister-in-law settling down next door to her. So she was some very involved in her nieces and nephews' journey through life. When she did come out of her house after her mother passed away and therefore was considered secluded, she was only seen wearing white. And oddly enough, the only surviving article of clothing that can be verified as hers is a white cotton dress pictured to the right here. White became her symbol that most people correlate with her when they think of poetry and color. And white was the color of passion and intensity, at least to her in her poetry, much different than our culture's use of white being pure or um, other symbolic messages. Her health throughout her life was not one of greatness, but she did have a pretty steady record as far as if she got sick or not. She didn't typically get sick from my research I've done, but she had a constant eye affliction, which the sounds to be similar to a migraine almost, but it was a sharp piercing in her eyes and behind them that doctors could not figure out why, although she could have also had a possible case of tuberculosis at one point when her siblings got sick. She was nursing Lavinia and was trying to help get her healthy, and there is a possibility that she contracted that at one point, though both her and her sister recovered. She had possible anxiety and depression, which could, I said possible. We do not know for sure. There was no medical diagnosis done, but from what we've seen, this could be one reason why Emily Dickinson was such an secluded figure. She died in 1886 when she was 55 years old, and the immediate cause was a stroke. Although, as my notes say, the attending physician thought that it could have been Bright's disease, which had caused that, and from more modern posthumous diagnosis that doctors nowadays thought she might have was severe primary hypertension, although it has not been confirmed either way on Bright's disease or the hypertension. This is what doctors nowadays and back then thought, but as we do not have her remains, we cannot test for it. After her death, her sister Lavinia found about 1,800 poems in Emily Dickinson's room from which she had been shut up in by her own will. Her she sent Lavinia sent the poems to the sister-in-law, but after about 2 years and the sister-in-law had not done much, Lavinia sent them to an editor. The editor made up titles for it, fixed the grammar that was needed for her to become more successful through that age and with all of the more limited thinking that was going through the people's minds during that time era. He also fixed the meter to make it more consistent and concise, and he made sure that some rhyming words were corrected to make sure that they actually rhymed. The first academic editions, or scholarly editions, as I found in one place of research appeared in the 1950s, and an improved edition became available in 1998. So you can see that while she was somewhat popular and acknowledged during the like about 100 years after, or 75 years after her death, it wasn't until closer to the 50s that she became more popular and more wide known. These are my works cited, the first four for research and verification on my sources. This is page 2, which also has 4, but it is the second selection of 4. And these are the last 4 of my sources. And I will say that most of them are websites, although I do have, I think, 3 YouTube videos in total that were also in my sources. Thank you so much. Have a great day.